Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Jason and I were talking about getting fired, and I think he was trying to convince me that he's been fired more times than I have. So we'll have to continue. We'll have to continue that discussion, Jason, and figure out who's been fired more times. I think I have the slight edge. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. We are delighted you're here. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, right from the Ozark Mountains here in Missouri, for now. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up and running live when we are live, 712-770-9418. 712-770-9418. Rich Scheben's with us live in Montana. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How's everything with you doing this morning?
Really, really well. Rich, I'm all excited. We've got, we bought a used chicken, we'll call it a chicken coop. It's a hoop house, and it was very, very well built by a house builder.
Okay, hold on. I'm confused. Does this have a steering wheel and tires?
Well, I'm going to put tires on it.
Okay, all right. And for those of you who might be new listeners, the reason why I said that tongue-in-cheek is because of the fact that it's very hard for Vincent Finelli not to talk about cars, fast cars, racing cars, performance cars, fixing cars, and even though we're on the radio, I can see his neck swelling when he talks about that. So that's a little inside joke, pardon my pun. Go ahead, Vince.
Yeah. So, Rich, coronavirus, we've been following it. We have been probably, USA Prepares has been following it, I believe, up with whoever would be number one in ringing the alarm. I think we're right up there with them, whoever they might be. I don't think anyone has spent more time on the coronavirus than we have. And in that line of thinking, I've met U.S. mail carriers and package delivery people, those FedEx and UPS trucks, and only one UPS guy actually got it, and he was the one who said, anyone who isn't concerned is an idiot. But everyone else is, wow, just wash your hands, it'll be okay. Well, yesterday morning, I reported with Dr. Norman Shuley that there were 7,000 cases of quarantine in the United States. Now, that has not really made the news, right? 7,000. Well, by the late afternoon, it was 8,000. Now, these are people who are quarantining themselves because they don't want to either get it or spread it. That's what needs to be done. But if there are 7,000 people, that's a lot of people. That's the population of a small town. Well, maybe a medium-sized town in the United States. That's a lot of people. How many people live in your area in Montana? Rich,
the whole state, I believe, is a little over 1 million people. But that's very deceiving because during the summer months, our population dramatically increases from tourists. We have a lot of snowbirds. So to really put a number that's official on that is kind of difficult to do. And from what I'm reading, there's a mass exodus out of California, Illinois, the Northeast states like New York and New Jersey. And they go into places like Texas, Florida, and the Rocky Mountains. And if this virus turns out to be half as deadly as they're saying, unfortunately, I think more people will be coming to the Rocky Mountains in lieu of the crowded Florida and Texas states, Vince.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I actually, I totally agree with that. And if I lived in New Jersey, I would want to be out of there. If I lived in California, I did my sentence in California, 18 months, and I was able to escape. California, when we first moved there, it was, the weather was okay, but the crime was out of control, and I couldn't stand it. So we packed up and got out of there, and we lived in a shack. And, we left a really nice brick 2-story colonial on the East Coast. Really nice. And we traded, we rented that out. And for more money, we rented an 1,100 square foot shack in California for more money. It was crazy. So I'm glad to be out of there. And for those who are paying attention to what it costs to live there and the crime rate, it'd be good to get out of there, before you have to speak, another language. Yeah. But the coronavirus is absolutely real. And class, on Friday, I'm going to do a special broadcast, and I'm going to tell you what I think you should consider doing in preparation. Tips from my unfinished, unpublished book will be 1 hour on Friday. So I just wanted to mention that. So coronavirus update. Rich Scheben, can you give us your take on where we are with it right now?
I will, Vince. And what I'd like to do is dovetail that with the present, let's call it an economic 101 update, since I've been saying that for many years. But let's talk a little bit about our economic situation after I talk about the coronavirus. And keep in mind, a lot of this, folks, is speculation. Now, we have a disease that has been documented to be up to 27 days being asymptomatic and contagious. Now, I just want you to think about all the people you come in contact with in a little less than a month. You shake their hands, you hug them, you talk to them, whatever the case is. It's just do the math. And one thing we do know, and it's been proven, that it's a geoengineered bioweapon. But the question is that a lot of people are asking, from my readings, is why now? And I've read articles where there's evidence. I mentioned this a few weeks ago about a professor from Harvard, which has been getting $50,000 per month from China. I've read where the University of North Carolina has sold this virus to China. And we have, unfortunately, so much treason, sedition, espionage, and people who want money, who are bought and paid for, that it's going to be very hard to contain under these circumstances unless we actually create penalties to these traitors against our country and humanity in general. So that being said, what are the reasons for the coronavirus being now? Now, a lot of it's speculative. We know it's geoengineered. We know that they've basically spliced multiple diseases in one. We know it has an HIV delivery system. I've read that it's basically, it can be race-oriented as far as the target, gender, age, DNA. So we have too much sophistication for some very evil people to have this information. As we know, they're selling it for profit to the wrong people. Now, why are they doing this? Is this to stop the Hong Kong protests? Did China buy this virus because they want to infect Taiwan? They've always talked about taking Taiwan. Is this revenge? And this is all speculation. And I want the mainstream media jumping down my throat and saying, oh, Rich said this. No, I'm just wondering why this is being a geoengineered bioweapon and been delivered now. Is this revenge for China for what Japan did to China before and during World War II? No one's mentioned that. I just thought that was something that should be considered. Now, when you look at this virus, is it made to crash the world economy, the Trump economy? Is this an alibi, a scapegoat, an excuse? Because people are waking up to the fake, phony, bought and paid for, printing money economy, where all the money goes to bonds to keep interest rates down because they can't go up, into equities, which I've talked about in many, many different instances on this show. Is this actually made to depopulate the planet and create supply chain disruptions? Because if you create supply chain disruptions in this just-in-time economy, especially for food, where people no longer think with foresight, this could be a very deadly situation in a lot of ways. Could this be a distraction for the printing of money that goes directly to the elite? Could this be a beta test to see how we respond as people, as governments? What about the mutations? I've read this virus has the ability to mutate depending on target audiences. I heard this can cling to receptor sites in lungs, and you can get it more than once. And it can lower your immune system so much it gives you heart attacks. Could this be a big kill when the next secondary infection comes in with everybody being infected with lower immune systems? So could this be a situation where they purposely quarantine people to get rid of so-called dissidents who want freedom, liberty, justice? In other words, the rule of law. So there is a lot of speculation, and what I want to do is dovetail this with I'm going to be as brief as possible. I want to talk about our economic situation. Housing, like credit card loans, through the roof. Auto loans, going into delinquencies like crazy. It's the highest ever. Subprime, the word is going to have to be redefined. Household credit reports are in the crapper in most of the country. Debt is through the roof. Delinquencies up. Bankruptcies up. Now, this is without the coronavirus. So this is one of the reasons I said an alibi to basically not only distract from the truth, but to say, so the powers that be can say, well, the coronavirus is the event that took down the economy. And we could talk about that in great detail, but I don't think this audience needs that. Let me move on. When you look at credit cards, in most cases, in most units of measures, and I tried really hard to research how many billions of dollars our limits are expanded by, but it's very high. I can't get an accurate read or number on that because a lot of this information is being purged. I've given hours of presentation on corporate debt, which is much worse. And as the bottom 93% are in this situation and the super wealthy get bailed out, it's only going to get worse and worse. And folks, we'll be back after the break. Thank you for being here.
Rich Scheben's with us. If you'd like to buy a copy of his book, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, it's available on Amazon. And you might even see my review from many years ago. Rich, please continue.
Well, thanks, Vince. You know, Vince, if I'm on a different radio show or whatever, I don't even promote the book anymore because what they're doing is they've taken so many 5-star reviews, deleted them, and replaced them with 1-star reviews. So we are living in the book-burning years here in America and the Western world, and truth is no longer politically correct. And there's some pun to those words, but I think the context is very easy to understand. Anyway, let me go back to what I wanted to talk about regarding our economy. Now, you've heard me. I've given many, many hours of presentation about the Federal Reserve, Keynesian economics, group identity, politics, and the demographic situation. Now, granted, we are the shiniest coin in the wallet. We're the cleanest shirt in the laundry. We're the prettiest house in the neighborhood. You heard me use those terms. But we do have the world reserve currency status. For how long, I don't know. And the fact that the U.S. dollar is indeed, there's double the amount abroad than there is in America. And I think that's going to keep the U.S. dollar above water for a little longer than other fiat currencies, which is losing a lot of ground. But you still got to look at the numbers. You got to look at the math. For example, household debt is $1.5 trillion higher than the previous record set in 2008. And they're using creative collateral. Remember how I said earlier subprime has to be redefined? And this is a very dangerous thing. Now, I'm all for buying a house and land. Okay, that's what we talk about on this show, is being self-sufficient. But people are going into debt for furniture, for vacations, for school loans where 90% of the degrees are worthless, for car loans, for this loan, for that loan. And, you know, I've seen people go on a 2-week vacation and take 2 years to pay it off. So you're paying the big banks, you're paying the brokers, you're paying all these people tons of interest, and they're the ones laughing to the bank, no pun intended. So even though household debt is going up, new mortgages just had the largest quarter since '05, which, again, this is good. But to me, the only thing that makes sense is buying a home with land, enough land you can raise some animals. You can have a garden. You can have freedom. Maybe you can practice your shooting. Maybe you can hunt and fish on it. Maybe you can put some greenhouses on it. Maybe you can live off-grid. It's the benefits of skill sets and thinking outside the box and living outside the box that's going to give you a happier life, not living in a subdivision where you can hear your neighbors actually screaming at each other. Okay. I want to talk about the banks, the brokerage firms. You know, we're so corrupt that even talking about what a definition is hard to do. But what these people are doing is they're bundling up junk loans together, and they're selling it to individual investors, to pension funds. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? So every industry right now is fighting for the scraps, usually bought and paid for through credit, while the wealthy get bailed out. And the little guy's paying 4 times more interest for these loans, while the brokers are paying 4 times less for the junk yields. So the spread's going to the creative accounting brokers / bankers, and the little guy gets screwed. That's called serfdom. So when you look at discretionary and recreational purchases, they're going down dramatically because the bottom 93% of the people are broke. Now, I'm looking at an article right here, and they're talking about U.S. institutions and the trillions of dollars of assets that they have. Now, keep in mind, folks, I have spent, for those of you who are regular listeners, hours presenting Economic 101, talking about stock buybacks, talking about fractional reserve lending, talking about printing money out of thin air. I've gone into great specificity and detail and talk about how the inflation of necessities for the little guy is getting a hand, while deflation for the little guy is getting less. An easy analogy would be, look how silver is staying low and gold's going through the roof, because if it's for the little guy, you're not going to get as much profit. And we'll be back right after the break, folks. Thanks for being here.
Rich Scheben's with us, and we are talking about the coronavirus, the impact on the economy. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. And, folks, the reason why they like to use the term institution is because they want to hide all the corruption that's behind the scenes. They want to, just like Glass-Steagall. You eliminate the regulations, they can basically do whatever they want, and they are. Basically, they're wielding trillions of dollars of assets with zero oversight from the people, from the rule of law. For example, State Street, $28 trillion in assets. J.P. Morgan, $25 trillion. Northern Trust, $11 trillion. BlackRock, $7.4. Vanguard, $6. Fidelity, $6.6. Schwab, $4. It goes on and on and on. Basically, when you look at the books, so-called the books, from 2019, the U.S. government spent $4.5 trillion, with the majority of the money going to the companies that these banks own that we have bailed out, whether it be through to the company or to the bank. You see how that works? So the top shareholders of the largest companies, which are in the U.S., and I use that with an asterisk and quotes, because most of these companies are global for the purpose of censoring and surveilling the people to control, manage, blackmail, and bribe the people. So it's always the same list of banks owning the largest companies. So the control goes to the banks and to the company with cooperation from the government. That's called fascism. This is what Donald Trump inherited. So they all have different names, the so-called companies, but the owners and the people who control them are basically the same. And they meet through, it's basically a secret meeting because it's a board of directors meeting. So the little people can't go in and ask for accountability. Let me give you a list of some of these names, and you can see why the stock market is being held up by some of these big companies, and the S&P 500, which are 40% zombie companies. In other words, they sell all their assets. They can't even pay off their debt. But they're still getting money from the people via the banks, via the taxpayers, via the printing of money, which inflates the dollar and loses value to the dollar, so the little people is losing ground. Some of these names are Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple. You've heard me discuss these. Home Depot, Visa, Johnson & Johnson, pharmaceutical company, Microsoft, Pfizer, pharmaceutical company, Procter & Gamble, same thing, United Health, same thing, McKesson Healthcare, that's a drug wholesaler. It goes on and on and on. But how about things like Qualcomm? How about Disney, which controls ABC, Fox News, and Fox? How about AT&T, which controls CNN, which is in every airport and every public institution? So you're forced to see it, and then they call that ratings. How about Viacom, which owns CBS and Comedy Central? You know how much information is falsely, through propaganda, hoaxes, false flags, gaslighting, and all this crap through comedy? Satire and sarcasm is a way to basically transform the people and turn them from thinkers into followers. How about Comcast, NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, Sky? These, can you see how this works, folks? Can you see? It's a round robin of serfdom. Remember, I told you it's very little left-right paradigm. I've been saying this for 8 years. It's way more aristocracy managing and controlling the people. So just like the example that I mentioned earlier about, you remember me saying how the little guy pays 4 times more interest for the loans while the bankers, brokers, whatever you want to call them, are paying 4 times less for the junk bond yield, and then they get the spread, and discretionary and recreational purchases are going down for the bottom 93%. So we, the little people, and some entities of our own government, have to borrow this new printed money from these so-called private banks, and again I use private and American in quotes with asterisks, and then they get first access to the Federal Reserve's new printed money at the cheapest rates because of their cabal member banks, and then after that those so-called banks borrow and give you that new printed money, and we're allowed to borrow it from them. And this is written in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So it's getting almost impossible for the bottom 93% to break out of a caste system because it's all corrupt. And, unless you can be part of the distraction party, which is like one out of many examples, throw a ball through a hoop and make millions of dollars. That's called bread and circuses. Unless you're part of the dumbing down of America, like teaching little boys how to give BJs in school and teaching little kids how to choose their gender identity and screw up their life, or telling people PhDs, like the University of Illinois. I gave that example probably a year ago, where a professor was saying math. She's a math teacher. She was saying math is white supremacist and should not be objective, should be subjective. You can't get any more stupid than this. And of course, the division, the distraction, dumbing down, and division, dividing us by every group possible in order to foment hate, division, and especially lower the bars of standards and expectations. And Vince Finelli can verify. I've been saying this for 8 years. When you lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job, it's going to metastasize like a cancer into every form of life. And that's what's happened. Okay, I have some articles here. Washington Post claims elites should run elections. Quietly edits article after public outrage ensuing. Okay, the Washington Post, folks, is owned by Bezos, Jeff Bezos. He's put billions of dollars of propaganda, not just him, but into everything is the white male's fault. No, it's not. If it was the white male's fault, well, the white male is a scapegoat. The attack is on males and masculinity. The attack is on poor and middle-class white males. Because if it was the white male's fault, then why isn't the people confiscating the wealth of Bezos or Zuckerberg, who called the American people stupid? You remember that? Or Zucker, or the Rothschilds, or the Rockefellers, or Gates, or Jonathan Gruber, who was calling the American people stupid in lieu of Obamacare. I gave hours on that years ago. How about Soros, Murdoch, the Clintons, Buffett? How come if white males are the target and they're the bad people, why aren't these people getting their wealth confiscated by the people? It's all BS. It's propaganda, false flags, hoaxes. Next article, Maxine Water. Americans, where are you, she says. I don't hear enough voices resisting. Well, do you remember when Maxine Waters a few months ago, folks, said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but she was talking about harassing Republicans, attacking them, going to gas stations and restaurants, making them uncomfortable. Should we say the same thing to lawyers and judges and bankers and politicians? Should we ask the question, should lawyers, bankers, politicians, judges, the sellouts of America who have attacked the bottom 93% of income earners, the bought and paid for class, in honor of Maxine Waters, who gives these people immunity from treason, sedition, racketeering, and espionage, should we confiscate their wealth, is what I'm asking. Because Maxine Waters said we should harass, attack, go to gas stations, restaurants, make all these people uncomfortable. So I'm asking you, Maxine Waters is just asking, where are you? I don't hear enough voices resisting Trump. This is a quote. It's in an article. I'm reading a frickin' article here. So, Americans, should we go knock on the doors of lawyers, judges, bankers, and politicians and take the money that they've taken from us because we don't get any representation, rights, or restitution of the rule of law? We're told that we don't have enough group self-pity points. Group self-pity points. It's hard to believe it's America. Next article. Buttigieg warns black law students white supremacy could totally destroy the American project. Really? Think of it. We have fallen into stupid so far. I don't think we can get out. Even though the DNC paid $12 million to former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele to gather information from second and third party sources. And the DOJ, the FBI, and the NSA, this is all proven, helped Hillary and the DNC collude with Russia. What about Uranium One? We've had a failed presidential coup, treason, sedition, espionage, racketeering, censorship, surveillance, crimes against the First and Second Amendment, ignoring antitrust and monopoly laws, FISA fraud, and nothing's being done about it. You can't make this stuff up, folks. And talking about all this black stuff, There's some great black people out there, and they're turning Republican big time. I mean, look at Carol Swain from Prager University. Says Republicans are the party of freedom and liberty. She gives some great presentations out there, which I've discussed over the years. There's a lot of great conservative black people who are thinkers and don't want to follow the narratives. Dr. Ben Carson, he says when you politically correct, you turn minorities into victims. I heard him say it. I was in the front row when he came to Northwest Montana. I heard it with my own ears. How about Candace Owens? She says she doesn't want to be a victim because she's black or because she's female. How about Diamond and Silk, Will Johnson, Brandon Tatum, Alveda King? What about the fact that Margaret Sanger, who was a Democrat, was caught on video and audio saying that Planned Parenthood is going into 85% of the black population to control them, to control their population? How come Barack Obama, under the same units of measures and calculations, double black unemployment, where President Trump has done the opposite? How about where's all the screaming when African countries are still selling blacks as slaves? How about the KKK? The Democrat Party was the KKK. That's what started the KKK. Folks, we have to think for ourselves, and we have to read and research. Next article, Obama DHS whistleblower found dead with gunshot wound to the chest. Yeah, right. I've read the comments on this article. I probably spent more time reading the comments than reading the article. It's basically, I'll say, did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? That's basically the brunt of this. Next article, California Public Pension is investing into Chinese military right under Gavin Newsom's nose. Do you understand how serious this is, folks? This should be absolutely looked into. How come the DOJ, how come there isn't indictments? Where's the declassifications? FISA warrants.
Class, Rich Scheben's with us, and we've been talking about all kinds of systemic failures everywhere across the United States. And I just wanted to bring something to light. We've been talking about the coronavirus for 3 weeks plus. And here's an article that describes, it's on Zero Hedge, describes disruption. And I've been talking about the supply chain and how concerned I am about it. Well, here's how bad it is. Now, Procter & Gamble is a very large manufacturer of everyday type products, household products, things that you recognize the names of. They refer to themselves as P&G, but it stands for Procter & Gamble. So what do they make? Well, Charmin, Pampers, Tide, Crest, Gillette, Duracell, IM's dog food, Bounty paper towels, Downy fabric softener, Dawn, Gain, Pringles. The list is huge. Well, Procter & Gamble has now officially warned that 17,600 of its products, 17,600 of its products could be affected and disrupted by coronavirus. Procter & Gamble used 387 suppliers across China, shipping more than 9,000 materials. So 9,000 individual ingredients are used by Procter & Gamble in selling you and me and others the products that they manufacture. 17,600 are at risk of supply chain disruptions because of the coronavirus in China. It's huge. It's huge. Can you do without Charmin? Absolutely. You can switch brands, and you should, because of the kind of advertising that they do. Charmin is puffed up to make you think you're buying more than you're buying. I don't buy Charmin, wouldn't even consider it. Pringles, those are smashed up potatoes and other ingredients to make you think that they're potato chips. They're not potato chips. Crest, got fluoride in it. That'll help lower your IQ by about 5% because of the fluoride in it. I think you can do something else to brush your teeth. Maybe salt and baking soda. That's what I do. That's what we do at our house. Why would we want to give up 5% of our IQ so that we can squeeze a tube of toothpaste? It's beyond stupid. But those are the kind of products that these wonderful companies are making for your convenience. So we've got lousy products. The supply chain is disrupted. And if you have an automobile, we heard it from the horse's mouth. We told you 3 weeks ago or so that engine parts, and I specifically mentioned a cam position sensor on a modern engine. And I'm talking, since 2000 and newer. A cam position sensor. It's a little sensor. It's $50 or so, depending on your vehicle. And if that breaks, and they do, and they break often, and when they do, you're not going to be able to start your car. And where do they come from? China. It's a big problem. So we know for a fact, because we went right to the horse. And I can't tell you exactly where we found this out. But we believed it, and we confirmed it, that automobile engine parts, the supply chain, it has been disrupted. And automobile transmission parts, the supply chain has been disrupted because of the coronavirus in China. It's really, really serious. The consumption of copper, we reported that weeks ago. Chinese have used the term force majeure. They're saying that the force is so big that we cannot accept, meaning they, the Chinese, cannot accept any copper, even though they have contracts to receive it and pay for it. They can't accept it because they can't use it. They can't use it because the factories are shut down. Can you imagine that? The factories are shut down in China. Now, you know this. South Korea shuttered their smartphone factory. Samsung. South Korea is running out of parts for their Kias and Hyundais. If it takes 10,000 parts to make a car and you have all but one, you can't sell that car. Think of it like you don't have the wheels, or you don't have the spark plugs, or you don't have the cam position sensor, or you don't have the wheel lug nuts, or you don't have the axle, or you don't have the axle boot that keeps the dust out and keeps the constant velocity joint from failing quickly, or you don't have the oil filter, or the oil filter drain plug, or the oil filter gasket, or the window seal, or the window motor, or the window switch. I mean, the list is almost endless. That's what manufacturing is facing. You think you're going to buy sneakers? You think you're going to buy shoes? You think you're going to buy belts? If you look, it says made in China on just about everything that you buy. We're in a world of hurt. Get what you need now, if you're concerned. You got 22s? We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. Zero Hedge article on February 23rd. And this article says that Hynix, Hynix, that's a company that manufactures electronic parts, immediately told 800 employees late last week not to return to work and stay home for several weeks as a prevention measure to stop the spread of the deadly virus. Now, this company is in South Korea. Samsung and Hynix are two major electronics makers in the country, and they're experiencing virus-related disruptions. Hyundai Motors and its sister Kia Motors are considered, the two of them combined are considered the 5th largest automaker in the world. Now, you know that's true because no matter where you go, you see Hyundais and Kias in the United States. You didn't in 1960, that's for sure. They're based in South Korea, and they are experiencing factory shutdowns due to parts shortages from China. So South Korea is expecting it. Italy is 12 cities at least are on lockdown. 8,000 in California are in self-quarantine. And President Donald Trump says we're doing a good job, with the virus. The numbers are not real, in my opinion. There's one doctor in China who said that the Chinese government reported 1 infection when, in fact, there were 50. So the numbers are off by a factor of 50, if you believe what she said. Rich, your thoughts?
Well, that's why I went through all those speculative reasons on why the coronavirus, coincidentally, is coming out now. I think the scariest part of it all is the introduction, where it is now proven that it is a geoengineered bioweapon with a 27-day asymptomatic and contagious period, or up to. So there's a lot of, that's why I went through that whole list: malibus, depopulation, beta test, distractions, mutations, all this stuff just to make people think, because right now everything is speculation and we don't know. But you mentioned earlier, before the break, Vince, you said the word stupid, which is very apropos these days for most contexts. And I think we should stop saying you can't fix stupid. You know how that saying goes? People always say, oh, you can't fix stupid. I think what we need to start asking here in America, and believe me, I'm very grateful for President Trump, but he's got to do a lot of things. He absolutely has to eliminate the censorship and surveillance from big tech, because they've already sold out to the Chinese, and we've talked about that in great detail. But anyway, we need to start replacing that saying, you can't fix stupid, with a question, and that is, can we fix bought and paid for? What they're doing is, like lawyers and judges, they've actually started a precedent where they can be bought off. What happened to Epstein and all those children? It was supposed to be 10,000 CEOs, politicians, Hollywood, mainstream media people who was at Epstein Island and his other ranches and places. What about all those poor children? See, we have a privilege protection group class. That is the problem. And we, the people, need to be in control of the elected and non-elected official, especially because of these bought and paid for elites. This is why we need citizen journalists. We need alternative media, because almost every person in the top hierarchy position has been infiltrated, has been bought and paid for. And all they care about is their own self-interest, money, control, and they're manufacturing the perception of their own self-importance. And Vince, we can talk about all this stuff all day long. If we do not fix the system at the hierarchy levels, we will continue to have, I've given thousands of examples over the years on how the money goes from the bottom 93% to the top 1% to 2%. If we don't fix the corruption, basically the American people have been duped beyond repair. So basically, when you hear somebody in government saying this is not your pay grade, what it really means is, are you willing to sell out your favorite your fellow Americans? That's what that should mean. Anyway, and the first thing we should do is eliminate all statute of limitations from big corporations and these big oligarchies to really get justice, because we've been put in a situation where there is no justice. I mean, look at Roger Stone, 40 months in prison. General Flynn, his life is ruined. Brett Kavanaugh, he'll be forever known as a gang rapist. Hillary Clinton destroys 30,000 emails. Nothing happens. Adam Schiff's caught on audio soliciting foreign election meddling. Nothing happens. Comey and Brennan leaks classified information. Nothing happens. Andrew McCabe lies to the FBI. Nothing happens. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page plot a coup. Nothing happens. James Clapper commits perjury. Nothing happens. We don't have justice. We don't have a functional form of government. The hierarchy levels at every NGO, every government institution, period, is broken. They're all bought and paid for. I mean, U.S. agency which secures president's communications says its systems were breached. If our government is all bought and paid for, if everybody can be bribed or blackmailed, how do we continue to create prosperity and a good life for the people? Vince?
Okay, so my question is, where's Lucille? And by the way, class, if you're calling in, let the phone ring, and we will get to you. Jason is multitasking. He will get to you, and he will answer the phone and put you right into queue. I see that telephone lines are lit up, so I can see you're there, but Jason will be answering the phone, and we'll get right to you. So please just stay where you are, and we'll get to you. So Orscheln, the farm and ranch store, sold waste oil without additives as tractor hydraulic fluid, and because of their greed, right? That's what they did. Sears stopped standing behind its products because of greed. They used to have a saying, a slogan, a motto, satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. They don't do that anymore. So we don't even make farm tractors anymore. So if you're looking for a small farm tractor, heck, we used to have Ford, Massey Ferguson, Moline, Oliver. There's a whole bunch of companies that manufactured farm tractors. Not anymore. Not anymore. We don't make farm tractors in the United States. Now, they may say that there's an orange brand that is made in the United States. But really? I don't think so. We might assemble part of it, but I don't believe we make it top to bottom, left to right, and outside to inside here in the United States. I don't believe it. So someone would have to prove that to me, because I'm from Missouri. I'd like to see that. But we have lost our way because of corporate greed. And there was a news report during this broadcast that Warren Buffett is concerned, seriously concerned, about what this coronavirus is doing to the economy. But he feels that it really, don't worry about stocks. They're going to be okay. Really? They're going to be okay? So when I got my master's and my bachelor's in finance and economics, I was taught that in order for a company to succeed, you have to have customers. And you have to have good products and services. Otherwise, there's no need for you to be around. Well, if you can't get those Phillips screws to put your assembly together, or you can't get the shank of a screwdriver, or the butyrate handle, or the injection molding for a part from China, how are you going to make those parts to sell to the customers so that the stock value will hold its value? How will you do that? You can't. You can't. Not under market conditions. Maybe under an illusion you can, but not under normal market conditions. And that's where we're headed.
Vince, let me chime in here. Let me tell you what's happening, okay? This is the bottom line, and this article is just an example. Democrat congressional candidate Mark Judson says it's time to identify 90% of Trump supporters through social media records to fire them from their jobs. This is what's happening. This coronavirus, the supply chain disruption, this is what's happening. The people who work, who want to work, who can't work because they can't get a job because they're not in the right group, or they do something where the majority of Trump or Republican supporters are in, this is what they're doing. They're telegraphing everything that they're doing. That's why I talk about economics. That's why I dovetail them with social and political issues. That's why I bring up these articles, because they are telegraphing everything that they are doing, whether it's Maxine Waters' big mouth, or it doesn't matter, Buttigieg talking about white supremacy and blacks. They want to get rid of jobs. They want to create race war, gender war. They want as much conflict, chaos, and infighting as possible. And these are just strategies on how they're doing it. It's just like, and there's no cooperation because our government's bought and paid for. Judicial Watch basically was talking about Eric Ciaramella, the so-called fake whistleblower, and basically the DOJ and the CIA refuses to confirm or deny existence of records. How do you have a functional government when the people at the hierarchy levels, the top levels, are bought and paid for, are compromised, are blackmailed? How do you have commerce? How do you have a functional government? You can't.
I was thinking about well pumps. And, class, if you have your own well, and there are plenty of properties that are 1 acre that have water wells, where do you think most of those water well pumps are coming from now? A lot of them come from China. And if the relay in the well control box comes from China, and the capacitor to start that well pump comes from China, and you can't get that capacitor, I'm talking about something that might cost $7. If that capacitor blows in your well pump control box, you're not pumping water. If your well pump fails, overheats, burns out, you're not pumping water. If the relay that senses the pressure in your well pressure tank fails, and the Chinese don't supply the parts, you're not going to get any water. If your well pressure tank fails, now some of those are still made in the United States, if that fails, you're not going to have much water. Kyle in Montana, welcome. You're on with Rich Scheben.
Good morning, gentlemen. Howdy, Rich.
Hey, Kyle.
I had a couple of thoughts on this that I've been considering. When the Twin Towers got brought down, how they had the Patriot Act sitting there just waiting, it was already planned way before it ever happened. But I think the same thing is true with this. The Ponzi scheme of the Federal Reserve fiat money system that's been implemented throughout the entire world practically is going to crumble. And like you've been saying, Rich, the debt is too much. There's no possible way any of this stuff could ever be paid back. So what better way to blame it on something else as to have an engineered virus or an engineered disease that kills off whatever percentage of the world population and causes a complete disaster in the financial markets, and everything comes crashing down. Well, all of a sudden they're not to blame, right? But what they've already got something, I guarantee you, set up to be able to control people better by the end of this. Warren Buffett just come out and said, don't change your investing and all this kind of stuff, because in 20 or 30 years you won't even remember it. Well, that could be very well true. In 20 or 30 years, half the population of the world could be dead, and everybody else would be in good shape, and you'd have to rebuild everything then. It's just, to me, it's just this whole entire thing is a construct. And on a completely different note, and I'd love to hear what you had to say, but I'm sure you understand this better than I do. But anyway, that's just my thinking on that part of it. On another idea, there was a report that my daughter just sent me that she copied and sent to me with a text message that shows how this company took colloidal silver and oregano oil in a nebulizer and killed within 20 minutes to non-detectable levels the SARS virus. So all of these people dying of this stuff, folks, if you're going to get one, I've ordered 4 nebulizers this morning, one for my kids and one for me, and we have all the oregano oil, and I make my own colloidal silver. But stuff like that, if you can get it down deep in your lungs, And a nebulizer is probably one of the best ways to do that. While you can get them until this takes off, I want to make sure that I've got them coming. But anyway, that's something you might want to consider.
Absolutely.
Will have to. The other
Kyle,
thing to think about is, go ahead.
Can you give us a thumbnail advisory on how to make colloidal silver the way you do? What do you do?
What I do, Vince, is I have six 6-volt batteries. They're the heavy duty, not the cheap lightweight ones, the heavy lantern batteries, because I use 36 volts with mine. And I hooked them all in series. 6 times 6 is 36. I have wire that I use, the silver wire that drops into water. I take water and I heat it up to 137, at least 137 degrees. I don't boil it, and it is distilled water and a cleaned out glass quart jar. And so when I make mine, when I dump 4 drops in the quart jar of saline solution that I make out of Himalayan type sea salt. And so I put 4 drops in that jar. I boil, or get I don't boil. I use to 137 degrees the water. I get the wires all hooked up, a positive and negative, off of the batteries with alligator clips that I hook up on these wires that sort of look like shepherd's hooks. And then I pour the water in there and wait approximately 18 minutes until I have a good heavy solution.
Okay. Kyle, can you stay with us through the break? I've got a couple more questions so we can flesh out how you make it. And I'd like to ask you, have you ever considered using Canadian maple leaves, quad 9999? Rich Scheben's with us, and Kyle is fleshing out making colloidal silver. So, Kyle, to just recap what you've said. So you take 6-volt batteries, the lantern size, you put them in series, 6 plus 6 plus 6 times. If you do that 6 times, you get 36 volts DC. And you heat distilled water to 137 degrees Fahrenheit. I assumed it was Fahrenheit. You add 4 drops of your homemade Himalayan saline solution, and you use silver wires. You form them into a shepherd's hook. You put them into a jar, a clean jar, and you run the current through those 2 electrodes, those 2 silver wires, for 18 minutes. What kind of wires do you use? How do you know they're pure, and where does one obtain them? Is that eBay?
To be honest with you, Vince, I have been getting them from a friend of mine up in a town north of us here for years, and he gets them from somewhere else, and I don't know where, other than He told me they were 0.999% pure, and I trust him because I've known him for a long time. Okay.
If you use, and I don't know anyone who's done this, but if you buy Canadian maples, they're 1-ounce silver coins, and they're either 0.999, or if you look, you can find the quad 9, 0.9999% pure. That's what I would consider using, because when you're all done, you still have most of your silver coins left, and you'll pay roughly $20 a piece for them, but you'll have them, and you're certain, or pretty darn certain, that the mint was correct when they said they're quad 9. So one question I have for you is, have you used a total dissolved solids meter? You can buy one on eBay, or you used to be able to. I don't know if you can still get them because of the China shutdown. But for about $10, you can buy this device. It looked like a Pez, P-E-Z, candy dispenser, roughly about that size, a little bit longer. And it's battery-powered. You dip it into a solution, and it will tell you what the number of total dissolved solids happens to be. So for distilled water, it should be 0, because it's distilled water. Then when you add your 4 drops of Himalayan saline solution, you can then test it again and see what the total dissolved solids happens to be. And then after your 18 minutes, you can test it again and do the arithmetic to find out how many parts per million of colloidal silver you have. So just a thought. Have you considered doing that?
To be honest with you, Vince, I haven't. I've been doing this for about 20 years. And my friend up north was here, Ted, set this, he's kind of like the scientific guy like you are. And so like I said, I trust him really well. He said to use, and in all honesty, he told me, he said, set it up at least with 27 volts. So in his little deal, he used 3 9-volt batteries hooked in series for his setup. I decided to, and I asked him about increasing the voltage. He said it wouldn't hurt because his 27 volts, he said, take like for 27 minutes. Well, I was looking at the color of the water when he would do 27 volts for 27 minutes, and I would do 36 volts for 18 minutes with one of these lantern batteries, and they were like identical. So, if you go way too long, obviously they start getting so dark you don't want to use that. But I've been taking a tablespoon of that approximately per day for 20 years. And I have no problem. And Ted's like he's got to be in his mid-90s, and he's been doing it for way longer than me. So I trust what he does, and I did not, but $10 is nothing. If you can still get them, that would be a good idea to have. And if you don't want to make it in, if you'd have little initiative to do anything like that, at least buy you 4 or 5 quarts of this stuff and stick it back in a couple, 3 or 4 bottles of the good oregano oil, a really good, pure oregano oil, and set it back. Because, like I said, 1 drop of this stuff with the colloidal silver solution and breathing that in the report that my daughter sent me, within 20 minutes of breathing it in, they could not find any negligible amount of the SARS virus left alive. So
now, when you breathe this in, do you heat it? So you said nebulizer, I believe, or so you're not talking about a heated steam kind of a thing. You're talking about one of those air pump delivery systems like someone with COPD might use. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Okay. Now, you can buy them online for about $35. If it was me, and if I get to the point where this is really bad or someone's sick, I'm going to warm that water up. That's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to heat it up to about probably 100 degrees at least, maybe 120 degrees, so that the oil tends to dissipate quicker and deeper and get, finer particles. I'm going to heat it up because go ahead.
How much oil of oregano do you use do you use saline solution? Or do you use it with your colloidal silver?
Solution. I just use a colloidal silver solution that's going to have a little saline in it in order to make conductivity. But 1 drop or 2 drops, I would say at the very most. If I'm really sick or a friend of mine's really sick, I might go to 2 drops to get that in their system. But I guarantee you can't hardly stand to breathe this stuff in. It is not for the faint of heart, but it works. And, people don't realize that. I personally think that if everybody is lying to us, which, I mean, if you've got your head up and looking at all, you can see that everybody tends to be lying to us for the sake of profit and greed. Like you said many times, the sum of all individual greed is what's bringing this country down, which they will do. Better to be prepared. I'm trying desperately to figure out a way to get a new well pump and a new pressure tank just to have it. Mine works perfectly right now, but like you said, what are you going to do without water? How are you going to get it out of your well?
Kyle, you may want to call in on Friday, hour number 2, I believe, when I'm going to be talking about some of these things. my thoughts on well pumps, pressure tanks, what I have researched, what I have learned, and it will help make those pumps last a lot longer. Class, I believe that Kyle is absolutely on the right track, but I do want to caution you, as always, nothing special here. You need to do your own research. You can't, even though Kyle does it, even though I do it, even though others do it, you must do your own research. Don't believe it just because we say it. And the reason I'm saying that is because I don't want you to have your lawyers come and attack us because of what we do. You need to do your own research and make your own decisions. We're trying to give you a heads up and a start so you can do your own research. We've told you what we believe works because of our own experiences. That's what we do here at USA Prepares. So, Kyle, I don't want you to think I'm saying something special for you. I'm telling our class, don't even believe me. Don't even believe what I say. Make sure that you have done your own research. And here's an example. I'm looking at an article right now. Rush Limbaugh claims deadly coronavirus is being weaponized by China to tank the U.S. economy and bring it down and bring down Trump. But it's no worse than the common cold. That's the headline. Now, I believe the first part of it, that it's been weaponized by China and it will bring down the U.S. economy and Trump, President Donald Trump. But the part of being no worse than a common cold, I don't believe that for a minute. I think it's much worse than a common cold because no one would be concerned about the common cold and shutting down stores, and there wouldn't be a panic. If you heard that, wow, there's a lot of people who have a cold in Lebanon, Missouri, you wouldn't find the store shelves empty, right? You wouldn't. Or in Italy. Or you wouldn't see lockdowns of hotels or cruise ships. You wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see flights being canceled because of the common cold. No, it's much worse. And Rush Limbaugh, I respectfully disagree. It's way worse than the common cold. Kyle?
I think you're correct, Vince. Yeah, I think you're very correct. If anything, though, I do not necessarily think this will bring Trump down. This is just my opinion, because people tend, in a crisis situation, to want to maintain the status quo. And, you know, they want stability. They want security. And I think it's very possible it could cause a collapse of the economy. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how fast that could happen. It just depends how big the lie is that's being perpetrated to us and how deadly we really find out this thing truly is. Or is it really just in a sense, Vince, I always have to ask myself this question. I don't want to be played. You know, could it be that a lot of this information, you know, that's coming out is just that? It's what if it is not nearly as bad? What if there is a cure that somebody's got out there that they're sitting and waiting on until it kind of gets the panic of everything down so that these mega banks can go in and buy up these other companies for pennies on the dollar? Because I believe it boils down to greed. You know?
Absolutely. And if that's the case, Lucille, where are you? Lucille, where are you? Rich Scheben, your thoughts?
I agree.
Well, this is one of the reasons I went through a dozen different speculative reasons for this bioweapon. I mean, nobody knows. No one at our level, the people don't get the right information. We get, like I said, the propaganda, lies, false flags, and hoaxes. That's what we get. I mean, I gave, in the beginning of this show, a dozen different reasons why this might be. Who knows? I mean, we can speculate on this all day long. But I think what Kyle said regarding silver and oregano oil with nebulizers is a great idea. I mean, we've talked to, we're blue in the face, Vince, about Western diet and how it impairs brain function to destroying our immune system. We've talked about how GMOs alone changes our DNA and creates cancer. I mean, I know I've spent hours on this. And basically what it boils down to is an immune system compromise. You know, that's one of my speculative situations. That's why I use the term event. Could this be a disease that lowers our immune system for the big kill to come later with a secondary infection. And that's why this particular mutation clings to receptors in lungs, all the things I talked about. But the scary part is not just that it's geoengineered bioweapon, with 27 days of being asymptomatic and contagious. The scary part is that our American professors and universities, like I mentioned, Harvard, University of North Carolina, are being bought and paid for and selling this to China. If everybody is bought and paid for, there's no loyalty left to our country.
Okay, class, just a quick reminder, Friday, hour number 1 is Phil Hudock with an update. Hour number 2 will be tips from my unwritten book. Specifically, I'll be addressing what you need to do for preparing for the coronavirus self-quarantine. We are almost there at self-quarantine here at the farm. We are going out as little as possible, and we are very careful where we're going. Kyle, any other quick comments before Rich Scheben takes front of the classroom?
Just one. So what is the most intrusive thing that will be absolutely necessary for you to be able to get done before this virus gets, if it does, before this virus gets really bad? I would say that's dental work. If you're
Correct.
going to get it done, I would get it done now, as soon as you can.
I absolutely agree, and the reason, class, is self-evident, right? The dentists open people's mouths; they are in there, and the potential for even the gloves that the dentist wears to be rubbed against, we'll call it the lab coat, the white lab coat, if the dentist wears one. The potential for the gloves, the latex gloves, to be wiped against the lab coat, then the gloves get changed for the next patient. And is it possible that the new gloves can be wiped against that same spot on the lab coat? Is that possible? Of course it is. And what about the breathing of the air in the patient in the waiting room, or the patient next to you, or the patient before you, or the patient that used the restroom, or the doorknob, or leaned on the counter to pay the bill? It's all there right in front of you. You're absolutely right, Kyle.
All righty. Good to talk to you guys, and thanks, Rich, and you too, Vince. You guys.
Thank you, Kyle. And maybe if you have time, you might want to check in with us on Friday and weigh in about the well pumps, because I'm going to be addressing that. I have some specific thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, and I'll be glad to, Vince.
Thank you. That was Kyle in Montana. You know, it's always great to hear from Kyle. He's such a wealth of knowledge, practical knowledge. And you know, a lot of USA Prepares instructors are just that way. Rich Scheben, I had a quick question for you. I don't want to derail us, but seeds. It's now time to get your seeds and start planting those seeds inside. Are you doing that?
For this neck of the woods here in northwest Montana, I usually start planting maybe end of March, usually early April, my seeds, my tomatoes and things like that. And don't forget, folks, when you go to especially Walmarts or anything, any store, it's usually Monsanto seeds, it's usually Dow seeds, it's usually Syngenta seeds. You know, you're getting seeds that are not open pollinated. Okay, you're getting seeds that are not heirloom, which basically means the same thing, which means that you cannot use those seeds even if you bear fruit from it. And a lot of these seeds now, you know, they're Roundup ready. Okay, a lot of these seeds have been tainted. They've been in the laboratory fixed. It's so important that you get open pollinated heirloom seeds. And I want to make something I mentioned last year when we went up to Banff, Canada, just north of me here. We saw this. We were in this little town. I think it was in the city limits of Banff, and they had these beautiful greenhouses with huge plants, but I didn't see any fruit on them. or very few, because they kept the doors closed because they didn't want people going in and stealing their vegetables or contaminating their soil, and I understand that. I want to remind people, especially with our bee situation, bees, B-E-E-S, so important to realize that even though bees are decreasing, there are other insects that pollinate, but it's so important to buy a little kitty paintbrush. Okay, go to a 5 and dime store, dollar store, and buy a little paintbrush, and it takes me maybe 10 minutes per greenhouse. I had at least 60 tomato plants last year. In fact, we just finished our last tomato, I believe, yesterday, and potato, okay, from my garden here in Montana. Okay, so that being said, have a little paintbrush or several of them in stock so you can go from blossom to blossom and not worry about if bees are pollinating your vegetables. This is very important because I see a lot of people who have greenhouses, even if there are openings, they're very small. To have a greenhouse, you need very large openings in order to attract bees. It's so important. Do not believe what you read from the mainstream media. One last article, folks. Media push. False claim Trump offered Julian Assange a pardon. Quid pro quo. Totally fake. Everything is fake that comes from the mainstream media. Everything. Keep that in mind. Thank you for being here, folks. Thank you, Vince.
You're welcome. Rich Scheben. And if you'd like to get oil of oregano, I'll tell you where to get it. SE1.US. SE. Survival Enterprises. SE1.US. Kurt Wilson. That's where I get it. I buy it right from him. Same price you pay. $25. I suggest you get it. It's undiluted. See you next week.